When a tsunami destroys his island home, Mal, with the help of the British girl Daphne, must rebuild his civilization from the ground up. It is an arduous task, one that forces him to re-examine his most deeply held beliefs about culture, politics, science, and religion. Always a gifted storyteller with a keen wit and clever imagination, Terry Pratchett here reveals a poignant mix of pathos and humor as he searches for purpose and meaning in the human condition. The greatest scientists in the world have taught here for generations, muses one character, and still our children ask us, are there ghosts? What a piece of work is man. What a piece of work indeed. I am delighted to present the 2009 Boston Globe Horn Book Award for Fiction and Poetry to Nation, published by HarperCollins Publishers, edited by Anne Hoppe, written by Terry Pratchett. Anne Hoppe will be accepting for Terry Pratchett.
Actually, before I start, I'd just like to say on a personal note that this is a very special occasion for me. So it was 15 years ago that my last official act for the Horn Book was to attend the Boston Globe Horn Book Awards. At that event, I met my friend Kevin Henkes, who was being honored for Owen. It's a special delight to be back here with him tonight. And of course, it means the entire world to me to celebrate Terry with you. He would be here if he could. Unfortunately for us, this coincides with the publication of his latest book, Unseen Academicals, and he's tied up with the promotions for it. But he asked me to express his heartfelt gratitude for all of this and to share these remarks with you. I am sure that there are writers out there who are capable of telling the world clearly and succinctly why and how they wrote the books on which their names and likenesses now twinkle. They would be real writers who keep things in filing cabinets rather than in piles. They will have desks, quite possibly glass-topped, which, unlike mine, are not infested with mice. Yes, I know, this should not be possible, but it is an old Victorian desk with secret compartments in it. Secret, that is, to me, but not, alas, to the mice. Patch, the office cat, occasionally unleashes a pogrom, but what we have now is a stalemate at best. I cannot bring myself to poison them in situ because of the thought of the little bodies moldering in there, somewhere amongst the mislaid wills and long-lost maps to hidden treasure. I have met real writers. They make lists. They plan out their books on file cards. They do proper research with notebooks. And unlike me, they don't get totally sidetracked by a wonderful book about the frozen water trade on the US seaboard in the late 18th century. It would be hard to describe my usual way of working, but I suspect it would look to a bystander, at least in the early stages of a novel, like the activity of a man who does not know what he is doing. I would be reasonable to surmise, generally I do not, and the purpose of writing the novel is to find out. Fortunately, this usually happens about halfway through the first draft, I tinker around with ideas, invent characters, try out lines of dialogue, and generally play around with it until I have found a way to let myself know what I am thinking. Often, one of the characters says something that tells me what the story is about. Nation was not like that. It arrived like a tsunami. It took me over more or less. This happened about 6 months before the dreadful Asian tsunami of 2004, and when I saw the terrible news, I told my editors there was no way I could write the book at that time. It would simply be wrong. But the story banged away at me nevertheless, to the point where I had to give in. It was that or go mad. And the first thing I did was to write the song. It seems to me that I have always known that the tidal wave after Krakatoa sent a steamship a couple miles into the rainforest. It is one of those things that you remember. And ever since I have heard it, I have cherished the word calenture, a condition that affects becalmed sailors who begin to hallucinate green fields around their stricken ship. I wondered if the first man who looked over the side of the boat when it had been thrust into the jungle thought he had gone crazy. So I wrote the extra verse of "For those in peril on the sea," for poor Captain Roberts to sing as the sweet Judy plowed through the canopy, scattering birds and leaves. Here, indeed, was a sailor no longer in peril on the sea, but suddenly and urgently in peril on the land. And there it was, hanging in my mind like a vision, the white-sailed ship plunging out of the darkness, from the old world to the new, with a near-deranged captain tied to the wheel and making up as his vessel disintegrates underneath him, a postscript to one of the finest Christian hymns. I sang it quite a lot while I wrote the book. But all the time, there was another vision squatting there too. It is so clear in my mind that I can taste it even now. There was a boy, his back to me, holding a spear and screaming at the sea. I knew that he had lost something, and instantly realized that he had lost everything. There had to be a girl. She'd be a Victorian girl, with all the baggage that that word brings with it. She would have to be prim, and by the standards of the trouser-wearing peoples of the Northern Hemisphere, well brought up. But under those stiff Victorian clothes, she would be tough as nails. I took that as a given because my creativity always appears to fail me if I try to write a soppy girl. I just can't. You could poke me with sticks and it would have no effect. They sometimes start out soppy as anything, but as soon as they find that it doesn't work, they tend to become a reasonably close relative to Miss Piggy. And so on. In short, I practically nearly drowned under the force of this book. In my mind, it is still totally visual, a sequence of images rather than words, as if I was getting a glimpse at the movie that was yet to be made, and probably never will be. See later. Authors tend to have pack-rat minds as a matter of course, and I suspect that my mind packs more rats than most.